Hi everyone, I'm Misty and I'm your host for Start Your Art. And today I am so honored to bring Melanie Rivers. She is an amazing Indigenous mixed media artist and she's an expressive art facilitator. She teaches online and teaches women all around the world. Hi Melanie, how are you today?
Hello, I'm very well. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you join me. Today we are going to talk a little bit more about our inner critics. Can you elaborate a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, I find every single time I go to create, my inner critic is going off in my head, and I can't seem to get away from it. And I'm not sure that necessarily if you struggle with that you can get away from it, but there's ways to mitigate and to deal with that inner critic and still create.
You'll have to share some of that with us because I know that I have struggled for so long with that, and it definitely has affected the way that I've shown up to my art practice or just even my creativity, really.
Yeah, it can keep me from creating for one, and then every time I go to that blank page, I'm like, I don't know how to draw, or I'm never going to create something I like ever again. So, and some days it's stronger than others.
I battle those same thoughts every time that I show up, and it's only that sheer will of believing that the more you do it, the better I'll become.
Yeah.
That keeps me inspired to show up to my creative practice every day.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have, so I'm from the Squamish First Nation in West Vancouver, Canada, and we have a teaching around medicine, and basically that an experience can be medicine. And so I think of art as medicine, and so we can get stillness from it, we can get joy or playfulness or um, whatever it is we're seeking. It might be healing, it might be expression. But that inner critic can be a barrier or a block to accessing that medicine. So we have this teaching about you have to meet the medicine halfway. And so meeting it halfway for me is like dealing with that inner critic, and doing that with kindness. So self-compassion, kindness is the way to meet the medicine halfway, the art medicine or the creativity medicine, whatever creativity it is for someone.
Oh wow. How do you achieve that? Like can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So I feel like I almost have to trick myself to get to my art desk sometimes. And so one, I have a dedicated space for it, and I treat it like sacred space. So nothing else is allowed on my art desk, like no bills, no like clutter. It's just art supplies, or candles or other things to create the sacred space. So that's one. The other is sometimes I have trouble if I'm feeling tired. It's like, oh, I don't want to get my supplies out. It's too much work. And I sort of think of a whole project in my mind. It just feels too big. And so I'll say, oh, I'll just go and get my supplies out. I'll clear my desk off, get my supplies out. And that's all I'm going to do. And so that creates that small step. And so I'll go and I'll just get my paper out, my supplies out, and it'll be ready, and no pressure to start right then. And so then it's like an invitation. It's sitting there, it's waiting for me. Yeah, so that's one, because I think if people don't have a dedicated space, even if it's like a dedicated basket of supplies, and because I think sometimes not having the supplies and things ready makes it hard as well. So that's one thing. But the other is the self-compassion, the kindness. So when I hear that inner critic, one, I just make sure I'm noticing it. So I'll be like, oh, there's my critic. So it's just bringing that awareness to it. And then it's like, okay, I've heard it. I'm going to create anyway. So what's my intention for creating today? Maybe it's to play, maybe it's to learn, maybe it's to get grounded. And so I'll just have to remind myself because maybe I start creating, I'm like, oh, this looks horrible. And then I'll be like, what was my intention today? Oh, I wanted to get grounded. Well, telling myself this looks horrible does not help me get grounded. So, So for me, the intention is really important.
So do you set an intention each time that you create then?
If I can, but if I don't, and then I start going and I'm noticing I'm getting stuck, then I'll be like, oh, okay, why did I come to my art desk today? Because it really is medicine for me, creating art. And so if I'm judging my work, then I'm not enjoying myself, and then I'm not going to do it as often. I'm not going to access that medicine. So because sometimes I might be taking a lesson and I want to learn a new skill, and so that's the focus. It's like, well, maybe it's, this is the first time I'm doing this new technique. It's not going to be like brilliant, like lower that expectation. So that's one way for sure. And sometimes I just like, maybe I'm feeling angry and I need to just scribble, and or maybe I need to finger paint and just move paint around. So that intention is really big for me. And then the noticing and the self-compassion, because I struggle with my critic in other areas of my life. And so the self-compassion is a big one for me. It's been a bit of a journey over the last few years, and I started doing a self-compassion meditation every day for about a year. And that helped me a lot, because these thought patterns are habitual. So to shift to, because I've often motivated myself with like the whip, like, and that has its toll after a while. And so just really kind of exploring and playing with this idea of self-compassion, and then
That is,
time to rebuild that habit.
yeah, that is such an interesting, interesting practice, and it's not one that I heard before. And now that you mentioned it, I have the inner critic a lot more than in my art, and I never thought about it until you just mentioned that. That's just a normal part of my day.
Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like there's some sort of flaw in the human brain that has this critic. But Kristen Neff has some really great self-compassion work. She's kind of studied it and has some guided meditations on her website. And so I really access a lot of her stuff. And then now I'll even just like put my hand here and just like, may I be kind to myself. So if that critic's going off, just like, I got much more of a habit now of putting my hand in my heart, whereas before I couldn't even do that. Like I didn't know how to give that self-soothing, or that it felt awkward.
I just heard that a self-soothing come up in a conversation, and I've never heard that expression before either. And but it was just, I didn't hear much of the conversation. I came in at the tail end, and that was such an interesting thing, but I hadn't had the opportunity to explore that more.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think that using the art in this way is a way that we self-soothe?
For me, art can be self-soothing for sure. It gets me into the present moment. So I can be like thinking of the future or thinking of the past, some rumination or some anxiety. And so that's why I sought out art in the first place, something to kind of help me get into that present moment, into that flow state. So anyone that's experienced a flow state for through any kind of creative activity, where you kind of lose track of time, and otherwise I always know what time it is, except when I'm painting. So that ability to get into the present moment, and then in that present moment, I'm safe. I'm at my art desk. Whatever I'm worrying about is like in the future or something in the past. But in that moment while I'm creating, that present moment brings me, I guess, that's soothing, because I'm not in the anxious state.
Oh, wow. That could be a really powerful tool if, as if we practice it and learn that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that when you're using your art as a product, you can kind of lose that connection. and that joy of just being able to create, especially when it's so connected to your business.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that not only just for the creative work, but actually having that creative practice for self-soothing and for healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do a lot of live painting sessions with people. So my critic always goes off, especially if it's not going well. It's like, this is horrible. They're going to think I can't draw, or like, those kinds of thoughts go through my mind. And so then I just share those thoughts with them, because it gives others the permission to be aware of that critic and know that many of us have that critic. I've only met a few people that say they don't have that critic in their head. So it's a common experience. So I'll just share it. Yeah, I'm feeling like this isn't working, or I'm feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, or it's not turning out the way I wanted. And then I'll just keep going.
Oh, wow. That would be incredible. I don't know. I just see that as incredible bravery to share that out loud, because that's not something, I'm such an introvert. So just to think about sharing so openly about those things,
Mm-hmm.
it really is a brave place to be.
Yeah, it's definitely a vulnerable thing.
Yeah.
Share, and vulnerable to paint live in front of people.
Yeah, I couldn't, I just couldn't imagine. I know that I do teach, and I've taught live and in person. And so it always has that same element, but I was always constructing something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the mistakes weren't, that of my skills. It's just like, oh, the glue went to the wrong place. So now we're going to do this.
Yeah.
But I never really thought about that in my own creative work. But that's a lot of the reasons why I don't like to draw or paint live, is
Mm-hmm.
because, I'm afraid of that skill set that I have and just messing up where I lose my accountability. So that's brave.
Yeah.
Are there any other like tools or resources that you use to kind of help with the critic?
Yeah, one or two others I'd say is using my non-dominant hand, because then I don't have an expectation that it's gonna be wobbly. So there's less of a pressure I feel when I use my non-dominant hand, and I also feel like I can access a different part of myself, like almost a higher wisdom in myself when I use my non-dominant hand. And so if I'm like seeking answers to a question I have in my life, sometimes through a painting process, those answers will come. And particularly if I paint with my non-dominant hand, different imagery will come out, different thoughts. And I'm also able to see spatially better with my non-dominant hand. So I'll often start a painting with my non-dominant hand, and then maybe I'll switch over to my dominant one. But I'll place the eyes and the nose and the mouth more in the correct place, because I think sometimes it doesn't matter too. Like you can create a portrait where the eyes and the nose and mouth are not where they're supposed to be. But I tend to have better spatial awareness as well.
Wow. Do you think that that was just developed because you've used your non-dominant hand so much, or that it actually just
No,
uses a different side of your brain?
it does access a different part. I haven't dove too much into it, but there are some research out there around the power of the non-dominant hand. I've also used it as a writing activity, where you like ask a question with your dominant hand and answer it with your non-dominant hand, and that is fascinating too. Very powerful.
That sounds like a fun activity.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. So I guess when you're working creatively, do you typically work in a sketchbook? Do you work on a canvas? Like, how do you work with this sort of creativity?
My favorite are wood panels, wood cradle boards. I like painting on the wood because it feels very alive, but also the hard surface is nice to collage onto, and then also the wood grain can have interesting effects with the paint. So that's typically, I don't tend to do too much in journals. I think because I do have a perfectionist tendency, which is why I use all these other tricks. I find a journal, I almost feel constrained by it. And I worry about paint bleeding through to other pages and things like that. So I tend to either work on single sheets or wood cradle boards.
Yeah, I like to work on single sheets. I usually leave like my sketchbooks unbound, and then when I finish it, I will use like a simple binding. So
Yeah.
that way I don't have any of those happy accidents.
Yeah. The other thing, I'll try and paint quickly. So it's almost to keep ahead of my inner critic. So it's like, so painting quickly, or painting, say, with a large brush, or painting with my fingers, creates a different kind of expectation for myself than if I'm painting with smaller brushes or even with a brush. So I've used sticks and fingers and
You know, actually, now that you mentioned it, when I use my smaller brushes, I do become more controlled and more tight within my work. So that's interesting that you brought that up, because I struggle with the large brushes because I don't know how to control them as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to control, but you just, you know, it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you mind showing us a little bit of your creative practice and what that looks like on in a canvas?
Yeah, so I've got a little activity for us.
All right, thank you.
So feel free to use any supplies that you have on hand. And also, this would be a great time to set your own intention for this activity. So for me, my intention is going to be playful. And so play isn't a natural thing for me. And so again, I kind of have tricks to help myself be more playful, but I might do a bit of finger painting to do that. So use any substrate you have. This is some mixed media paper. This Strathmore mixed media is my favorite paper. And it's 184 pound, which is a nice thick paper, so it doesn't warp as much. And this one's a toned gray, which I've never tried a mixed media paper that's gray before. So you don't need to have gray paper. If you want to, you could paint your paper gray, but not necessary. It tended to just seem to be the right size that I wanted to use. I've also got some text pages here, and again, this is an optional step. And I've got a bit of pattern paper. I find putting a little collage down helps me break the ice with the page, as well as get it a little bit meditative. So the other way I break the ice is I take my pencil and I write kind of scribbly on the piece of paper. Could be anything, how I'm feeling that day, or intentions. If I want to be more playful, so I'm just writing that on my page. Maybe I want to write that I'm going to be kind to myself, and I'm going to bring awareness to that critic. So I'll add a little, I kind of just also just like the look of a little bit of writing on things that I have. I'm just writing the word love, kind. And so I'm going to collage these down, but I want them to be a little less straight. So I'm just going to tear it a little bit. Again, collage can be a way that I kind of start to feel a connection to get to my creativity, I guess. It's a little less stress. You kind of let in a way, the paper do its own work. because it adds its own interest. So I've just got some matte medium here. You could use anything really to glue your papers down if you're going to do that step. And I've just got a big brush. I'm just going to pour it straight on. Again, like I said, working quickly helps me get ahead of my critic a little bit. So I'm not going to get a ruler out and measure anything. I'm just going to throw these down. And then if you have a roller, you can roll it down. Otherwise, you can just like kind of smooth it out with your fingers. Again, I try not to worry about wrinkles. I do tend to be a perfectionist, so embrace the wrinkles of the paper as part of the interesting texture. So that just added like just a little bit of a frame there for me. I'm just gonna get my brush wet so it doesn't dry while we're painting. And so now I'm gonna draw a face. So this is the breathe. If you've not drawn a face or a portrait before. Again, you don't have to draw a portrait. Everything's like an invitation. And I'm going to walk us through step by step how to put on a front-facing portrait. And I'm going to do it with my non-dominant hand to show you that. Sometimes I will also work in a pen so that I can't erase. Because erasing too can get me feeling tight. So my intention is to be playful. This non-dominant hand really helps me access that. So I tend to like to not put the face right smack in the middle of the page because it can look a little bit like a passport photo. So I might just put it off center slightly. Maybe on this left side a little bit. So I'm just roughly gonna think of the chin being here and the top of the head here. Now everything's a little bit wet, which might make it hard for me, but I'm just gonna keep going. So you can kind of draw a center line. And I'm using charcoal just so you can see it better. But you could work with pencil or charcoal. And then the eye line's kind of halfway between the nose and the chin. So I don't want to get my ruler out because that's going to make me go tight, but just a little bit of a line there for the eyes. And then the nose is halfway between the eyes and the chin. There's sort of just some simple guidelines, and the mouth halfway between the nose and the chin roughly. So that gives me a starting point. And then I like to start with the nose because a lot of the other features can kind of be measured off of the nose. So, so I'm going to expect my hand to be a little wobbly. You could use your dominant hand or your non-dominant, whatever you feel. Because I have been using my non-dominant hand quite a bit, it has built up its own skill level. But it is always still more expressive than my dominant one. So the corner of the eye kind of roughly goes up from the edge of the nose there. I'm just marking in the corner of the eye. And then both eyes are going to be the same, roughly the same width. But again, embrace any imperfections. And so, and then there's roughly one eye in between the two eyes, eye width. So the top eyelid is kind of like a semicircle, but I kind of go a little bit flat across the top. And same with the bottom. A little bit of a semicircle, but a little bit flat across the bottom. And then we're just going to be looking straight forward because that's the easiest way to draw the eyes. Putting it in. My hand's not quite going where I want it. That's okay. And then I'm just going to pull my eyelid down a little bit because it can look a little bit scared. If the top of the eyeball and bottom of the eye aren't covered a little bit by the eyelid. And I'm just going to put the crease above the eye there, kind of following the same line. And then the eyebrow goes up, slanted up, and then slanted down. It kind of starts right where the corner of the eye is, sometimes in a little bit. So when we slant it down, the edge there, that helps create that illusion of a round face. And then I'm going to go to back to start doing the mouth, and I'm going to draw this little philtrum, which is basically like, almost like a little upside down V coming out of the nose there. And then I would say the top lip looks a little bit like a bird flying in the sky, and, you know, sort of far away from us. And then the bottom lip, a little bit bigger than the top lip. I just kind of start with a line there. And then I bring the edge up. So there's the basics of the features. I might bring this eyebrows in a little bit more. And then for some reason, my hand always wants to switch to my right to do the shape of the face, so I'm going to do that. And so basically, it's a bit of an oval. And right now my critic's going, she looks very weird. Yeah, I think maybe a little too wide, a little too low. Draw on the neckline here, shoulders. And I'll add in some hair. I tend to do hair that kind of looks like my own. I'm just bringing that face shape in a little bit. Add in some ears. Kind of start by the top of the eyes and come down. And neckline, top line. So I could try and erase these a little bit so I can kind of find her shape here, but okay, I can feel myself getting tight. So
I haven't drawn a portrait in years.
I was very quickly drawn to drawing faces, or when I started creating art. I had no experience with it. But I don't know, I think it's a self-expression, but I really enjoy faces. I think it's about I feel a connection. Okay. So I'm gonna switch shortly once I feel like I've got these features in to bring out some paint. And sometimes you want to tilt your page up if you're drawing flat, because it can get a bit distorted, our view, when we're looking flat. Okay, so I could add some more collage, maybe. Let's see. I'm just moving my sheets around, seeing if anything inspires me. I'm not sure it is inspiring me. Well, it might be nice to have a little bit in her top and her in the background there. Yeah, so maybe I'll do that. I pick colors that I love. I tend to use a lot of blue.
I actually noticed that my colors really are based off of my mood.
Yes. Yeah, if you're feeling a vibrant mood or a subdued mood, or an energy that you want to bring in. All right. Definitely poured out too much of my medium. So let's see if I can get some back in the jar. This golden stuff's expensive. Okay. So now I'm going to bring out some paint, and I'm going to bring out a white. And then, again, for simplicity, I love simplicity because it helps me get to my art desk. Not complicated. I'm going to use one or two colors and a little bit of a neutral colors. So you could do a black and a white. I've got a burnt umber and a Payne's gray. So you could just do one of those colors in a white, or two of those colors in a white. Or if you're feeling bright, maybe you want to use something like this, a purple and a blue.
Ooh.
Purple and a blue and a white. So just kind of one or two colors in a white. And if it's a bit of a darker color, you can mix it with the white to create different tones. And basically just going to bring in a bit of shadow and a bit of highlight, and nothing too complicated with the time frame we have here. And also making things simple. If you can do a creative activity at your art desk for like, or your whatever space you have for 20 minutes, half an hour max, I find I'm much more likely to do it. So I've just got some different size brushes. I'm just going to see if I was talking about, if you go bigger with your brush, it's a little less, keeps me looser. So maybe I'll use this one. I like these filbert brushes, but it doesn't really matter for this activity. I might even use my fingers more. And maybe I'll even just start with my fingers. If you are finger painting, you could use gloves, or I use this Skin Safer. Just creates a little bit of like, almost like a little bit of a barrier for your fingers. Also makes cleaning up easier.
Yeah.
And check your paints. There are some paints that are a little bit, can be a little bit toxic. So in keeping with my intention of play, I think I will finger paint. So I'm going to mix the white with these two colors, and I'm going to just start with basically your shadows on the face are everywhere that goes backwards from your face. So around the edges, the eyes are in a socket. The top lip is darker, under the chin, under the neck. And then all the parts of the face that stick out have the highlight. So the nose, the bottom lip, kind of right under the eyes there, eyebrows there, and the eyelids, because our eyes are rounded there, and the cheekbones. So that's, you can touch your own face to see, well, what is this part of my face sticking out or in? And that's basically, is it going to be a shadow or a highlight? And if you do 3 tones, a dark, a mid, and a light, then you can create that rounded shape of the face. Okay, so partly my Critic's going off again before I start this part, but here I go. If I really wanted to too, I could use my non-dominant hand here. Yeah, this feels way more playful than if I was using a brush. But you might also have a different intention today, so. I also like to think that there's a bit of a story that emerges through the painting process, and to just kind of follow the story.
I really like that idea that the story emerges.
Mm-hmm. It's like, what does she have? What medicine does she have for me today? And because I'm using my finger, it's a little bit imprecise here, so it's going to create a more expressive quality. Which I like, an expressive quality. I grew up very shy and introverted. I'm still shy and introverted, but expressing myself was not easy. And so I find art gives me that opportunity.
I definitely grew up the same way. I rarely spoke. I still rarely speak. And when I find myself in social situations, I'm either so nervous I speak too much,
Yep.
or I don't speak at all.
Okay, I'm taking white here, I'm putting it in some of the highlight areas. This paper itself almost creates a mid-tone for me. Right now, I definitely say I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Which for me is the point. At least today.
You know, I forgot how much I actually liked painting portraits, or not really portraits, but I like making characters.
Yeah.
And it's been so long since I've actually created any characters because I've been studying other forms of art lately. So it's actually really nice to come back to something you really enjoy.
Yes. So I might not paint her entire face. I might. But I think I'll add a bit of hair next just to see where that might go. And I think I'll use this brown. And if you have two colors that mix together, you don't have to worry too much about whether they're mixing or not. I like this brown and this blue together.
It does make a beautiful nutmeg color.
Yes. I'll give this blue in as well.
The large brush does make for looser work.
Yes. And I often will do more blended or sort of tighter work. And that's okay too. So it's like whatever you're needing for that day. I will say my critic has gone off on me again, saying she looks odd.
You know, and it's interesting because I think she looks beautiful.
Generally, I get to a place where I like what I've created. Sometimes you just have to keep going.
Some more shade in the eyes. Now, the one thing I like about acrylics versus watercolor is that they dry so much faster, and
Yes.
the blending is better.
I think I also choose acrylics because I feel that there are no mistakes. You can just paint over it. If you don't like it, paint over it.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, with watercolor, there's less of that freedom for sure.
So I did pick up a small brush I wanted to go over the features, the eyes with some paint, which I didn't feel like my finger was gonna do. Although I have done entire paintings with just painting with my fingers. Kind of want a large sheet of paper if you're going to do that, so that you can get into some smaller areas. Because our fingers are only so small. So I tend to make the eyes all the dark color. This works with acrylic. And then go back in with the second layer with something a little bit lighter, like over where the iris is, and leave the pupil dark.
I actually went very abstract with my water. Yeah.
I find abstract very hard actually, but I love doing abstract as well.
Usually I struggle with it, but I'm kind of enjoying it.
That's good. Added a white highlight into the eye there. And I'm going to put a little bit of white above the eyelid. I'm going to add a bit of that crease above the eye with the pink hue. I'm just going to bring in a bit of her chin again with the brush here.
Very much.
This is about where I might get lost in the process too.
Yes, it's so easy to get lost here.
I'm using these golden open paints, which they stay wet longer.
Oh.
Which is actually making it slightly harder for me today, but generally I like them for portraits because they do stay wet longer, and you can keep blending longer.
You know, I did not get to play with those before I switched over to my watercolor practice.
The watercolors your preferred or your
Yeah, it's, acrylic I found really easy to create work, and watercolor has always been something that I've wanted to learn how to do, so I can children's illustrations, and trying to learn to create more like a child and more abstractly has been really challenging for me, and watercolor seems to do that.
Yes.
Because you can't control it.
Yep.
And I'm
sorry.
yeah, no, like I I have a struggle with trying to control things for safety reasons. And so it's something that I've been really trying to practice hard with this last year,
Yeah,
to still do that.
that's great. I've recently pulled out watercolors a little more. I've been using them more. They're also nice to travel with because they less messy, and they can just bring a few colors.
That I have, like, I've started to notice how much easier it is to create with them. I struggled a lot in the beginning, but now I really like the watercolors because it is really convenient. I have a large palette, but then I have a really small palette that I just go with. And it's like, I don't know, it's so freeing, I think.
Mm-hmm. So I just added a bit of white in the background a little bit there. Just to kind of integrate the collage papers. And I'm just kind of putting a little of the brown into her top. But just kind of here and there so that you can still see this pattern paper. Oops, I just rolled my paintbrush in the I used to be a tidy person before I started art.
You know, I found that I still can't let that go.
Still want to do things tidy?
Yeah, especially like here in the studio, it's so hard for me, but I try. But I find that it's difficult for me to come back and create again if I have to clean.
Yes, me too.
And so as long, like you say, as long as I have that dedicated space, it seems to, you know, to just flow more naturally.
Yeah. So I was trying to add some charcoal in, but paint's so wet. It's basically just carving into the paint, which is also kind of fun. So I'm trying not to get too tight with myself right now because I'm going into more details. She's definitely expressive. So I'd say there'd be like, you know, people sometimes wonder when they're done. I usually feel like I'm done when I stop wanting to add something else.
I couldn't agree more because there does come, it just seems to come natural. You're just like, yep.
I'll make sure I didn't lose the expressive quality I had in the beginning because I went in with a brush. So I come back in with my finger.
I think I like there. It's definitely more challenging to work while wet.
With the watercolors there?
Yeah,
Yeah, because you can't layer.
nope. That's purple. There.
I definitely say I'm starting to refine. Which can be kind of meditative as well.
Yeah, it really can. I'll have to stop there to let the water dry. It just keeps blending now.
Yeah, well, I could probably stop anytime here.
All right. Yeah, you can move up if you like once you're finished.
Okay. So, oops,
You turned out beautiful.
wrong way.
I love acrylics. I miss them. They are so good at blending.
Right.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah, just gonna turn this light off.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for taking us through that portrait. That was just such a fun process, and it was so soothing, as much as playful, but as soothing, and it really was a meditative playtime. And as you know, I used watercolor for mine. And I think what I'm going to do is after it dries, actually go back in and add details and go a little bit more with details, because I went with a totally unusual color palette for this time. So I really do appreciate it. I know that you have also created a wonderful art medicine free gift for everyone in the community. Would you like to tell us more about it and where we can find you on the wide web?
Yeah, so melanierivers.ca, but there'll be a link for this free course that I have for you. So it's a 4-lesson mini arts medicine course, and some of the same things that we've done today. There's some non-dominant hand drawing, there's some finger painting, there's some setting intentions for creative practice, and the final lesson is an expressive portrait one. So we'll go a little bit more into skill with that one as well. We do use brushes, so build a little bit of confidence around portraits, but the whole time we're focusing on the self-compassion, kindness while doing the work. So.
Well, I am really excited to explore more in depth with you with portraits and just using this as an expressive form. This was so much fun. I am just so thankful that you joined me, and I can't wait to learn more from you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. It was super fun.
Bye.
Bye.